Welcome back to the Stan Simpson Show. Remember, catch us 24/7 online at ctnow.com/Stan. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, too. Now, how do you avoid family feuds? Lori Giles, the lawyer and mediator who deals with this issue with elderly parents and families having this really tough decision. Do you send mom or dad to a nursing home? Don't you? It causes a lot of consternation. Tell us some stories you've seen here. What's the ramifications?
Stan, I've seen the whole spectrum of families who just break relationship and siblings who never speak again because everyone is convinced that they know what's best, what mom or dad would want. And there's the guilt and there's the sandwich generation pressure. So it's something that people really fight about. I've seen families actually go to court to determine who is going to do what, and also to figure out if the parent is going to go into a nursing home or not go into a nursing home. And it's always, unfortunately, during a crisis situation. Most people fail to plan up front, and so it's always when the diagnosis comes or when the stroke comes or when something happens that families just implode.
Now, you mentioned the sandwich generation pressure. What is that?
You're trying to care for your children on the one end and then your aging parents on the other side, and you feel like you're just in the middle, just crushed with everything and all of the demands. And it gets very hard and it's very stressful.
Yeah. Now, what happens? You mentioned the decision maker. Who ends up deciding who makes the decision? Say you have 3 kids. How do you determine who? Yeah, how do you do that?
I think that families need to sit down and figure that out, and if they can't, as early as possible. And if they can't figure it out, to immediately go to a mediator who can help them figure it out, a third-party neutral who will sit back and take all the emotion out of it and try to help them work through, develop a plan, and figure out really what is in the best interest.
But here's the problem, though. To make that decision to go early, right? You don't want to be a death sentence for your parent. Here's your parent. Maybe they're in good health. You say, Mom or Dad, we want to have a session to determine who sends you to the nursing home. You're like, well, hold on a second. You guys planning something? It's not easy to do, right?
I think you need to open the conversation a little differently than that. I think you need to start...
Less abrupt?
Much less abrupt, just a little. I think you need to start by saying... What would you want? If something were to happen, always talk in ifs because it's so much easier to say if as opposed to now that it is happening.
Right.
So if something happened, what would you like to see happen? And, I think sometimes with the death or the illness of a friend or a relative of theirs, then you can say, wow, if you were in that situation, what would you want?
Well, let's look at some quick tips now. You have some things that people should do. Number one is know the financial picture. Let's talk about that. What is that?
That's very important. So many people have no idea of where they stand, and they have no idea where their parents stand. And it's not until you walk into the house and find the lights are off that you realize that maybe bills are not getting paid. So it makes sense to get a handle on where they are, what their finances are, what their true medical condition is, and what their legal condition is.
Asset planning is part and parcel of that. So many families end up having their assets drained because they don't plan ahead, right? Talk about the importance of having estate planning because if you don't have that, right, all the assets, all the money the government will take it all.
I think that prior to estate planning, there needs to be some elder planning. You need to figure out maybe it's putting in living trust, maybe it's some other kind of trust, doing things with assets, selling assets off, whatever it is before the death happens. Because don't forget, the estate plan doesn't come into play until after the death. And generally, it's already a mess by then.
But the Title 19 or Title 9, whatever the heck it is, Title 19, where basically the parent is indigent, right? You got to exhaust a lot of money to get to that point. And so many folks don't do the estate planning so that the look-back period for the government, I think it's 5 years now, so that...
In Connecticut, it's 36 months.
Right. So the reality is, to be very blunt, families have to shelter assets of a parent who gets older, and that's a hard conversation to have to parents. Hey, we want to start taking things out of your name so we protect some assets. How do you have that kind of conversation?
I think the best way to do it is for parents to put things into a living trust. That way...
What is that? People say that all the time. I don't think most people know what a living trust is.
A living trust basically is a document that holds all of your assets. So all of your bank accounts, your home, whatever you want would be held within a living trust. So technically, they no longer own it, but with the living trust, they would start out as the trustees, so they would have complete control. So they can still buy and sell property. They can do whatever it is they want.
But they are the owner from a tax standpoint.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's very important.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go back to your tips then. We talked about identify the specific needs, right? Each parent needs something different, so walk us through some of the hypothetical needs that
I think the first thing is to really sit back and talk to their physician and find out, because one of the problems that people do is they try to over-service their parents or under underservice their parents. It's a matter of figuring out what services are really needed.
So they're cohesive, right?
Exactly. And does that mean a nursing home, or does it mean assisted living, or can they still stay in their own home? So it's a matter of not getting more service than they need, because if you do that, then they'll lose their independence faster. And not making sure that they're getting any services. That's the other end. So it's finding that middle point that works for your family.
And exploring those options, knowing what's out there, what makes sense, right? And
so
finally,
many new options out there.
And then have a plan, right?
Absolutely. Develop a plan and stick to the plan. Figure out who's going to do what, where the money is going to come from, how it's going to be spent. Figure out how things are going to work for the rest of their lives.
How about the family interplay, I'll call it, where every family has the one person who's going to be the caregiver. One person who's not going to be that involved. There can be a lot of resentment that builds up from one parent who feels that, hey, I'm carrying all the burden, even though there's a plan here. I'm the one executing it, doing everything else. How do you deal with that? Because a lot of, I think, animosity develops in that area. It
absolutely does. And I think the key is to figure out, what have people been doing? You've had family gatherings. Who did what? Who was the hands-on person? So understand that and tell people what their role is going to be, and don't just expect someone to do all of the work. And that's what happens in a lot of families, that you have one or two of the children doing all of the work when everyone else is sitting back, and it's tiring. So it's important to decide what work needs to be done and who's going to get done.
As a mediator now, how do you begin to mediate? You got to bring these different egos together, different agendas. You know, some of whom may not even have liked their parents for the last 5 years. Now they're involved or not involved. Where do you begin to find common ground among these disparate agendas?
I think the first thing is to sit with the parents. I like to sit with the parents alone first and figure out what really works for them, and then bring the children.
What if the parent is not quite there yet? What if the parent is either on the stages of Alzheimer's or not someone whose voice is as strong as it used to be, if you know what I mean?
And I think that's why if they're alone and they're writing it down or they're talking about it and just in a very general conversation, not any decision making, but just a very general discussion about what works for them, what they've seen with their family, what they've seen with their parents. All of those kind of things is how you bring it up.
All right, real quick, 5 seconds. The book you have out, Elder Planning, the book out there, people can get it and get it.
Yes.
Get it how?
It's available on Amazon, and it's available on my website, LoriGiles.com.
All right. Thanks to all our guests, Brian Szynski, Lori Giles, and Marcela Nunez. You can send your show comments or requests or watch us again at ctnow.com. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Become a fan of the show. Look out for our tweets. For the good folks here at Fox Connecticut, I'm Stan Simpson. We'll see you next week.